Welcome to another episode of First Rodeo Radio. Today we are joined by Matt Cutair. He is the managing partner of Adelphi Racing. What's going on, Matt?
Hey, what's up, Matt? How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Appreciate you joining us here in mid-July here. Saratoga just opened up. Very excited to talk with you. I think I recognized your face there at Aqueduct here a couple weeks ago and said hello. That was my first time there, which is a really cool experience. So appreciate you hopping on and excited to kind of run through kind of how you got into the game and kind of what Adelphi is up to.
I'm glad you got into Aqueduct right before it closes next year. You have about a year left, or less than a year, really, at this point, right? So you got in just under the mark there.
I loved it. I mean, it's got a lot of charm in my opinion. I think it's awesome. I would miss it. It's my kind of place, you know. Sometimes people are just screaming at TVs all the time.
It certainly has character, and I probably am there more than most people, honestly. I'm pretty much there every weekend. We at least have one runner or I'm over there to hang out with somebody or claim a horse or whatever it may be. While it's going to be great to get into a brand new building and the new Belmont looks awesome, there's definitely some charm to what goes on at what me and several of my friends like to call the Mecca, which is big A. So it's going to be. I would advise if you whenever we find out what the last day at Aqueduct is going to be, which I guess will be like. I think it'll be like that last day in August, depending on what they do with the 4th of July thing next year up in Saratoga. Whenever that last day is, I think Aqueduct is going to be the place to be. That will be a party of all parties, I would think.
I'll
Just
have
knowing
to
the
I'll have
crowd
to
there.
I'll have to make it up there to give it a proper goodbye.
I think it's going to be epic. So yeah, I'd suggest trying to do that. Anybody who's been there or hasn't been there, if you, I think the last day there is going to be quite something.
It's gonna be awesome. Yeah, so let's get into kind of how you got into horse racing. I read some article on the TDM. Looks like you grew up in Maryland and kind of maybe caught the bug going to some Preaknesses, and then when you moved to New York City, you got into it deep. I guess kind of tell the story of how you got into horse racing.
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't really have any like familial connections to horse racing in any way. I guess other than the fact that my aunt and uncle had a farm when I was growing up, and we would go over there for holidays, and they had a couple of retired race horses on the farm, and always liked, as a little kid seeing those big horses and that experience. But beyond that, I was just a fan of sports. Being from Baltimore, obviously the Preakness was a big deal, and so got into the Triple Crown and really just started following horses from that. Like to bet a few dollars here or there on sporting events and horses. So that was kind of my second entry point into the business or the space. Really was just the handicapping and the betting side. And really more than anything else, when I moved to New York, I was 19. I didn't really know anybody. I moved into New York City, and I was working and going to school, and for the first few months there, not knowing anybody, I didn't really have much to do on the weekends. And this was back when you had OTBs in Manhattan. And beyond OTBs, they had off-track betting venues at bars in Manhattan, like select bars. And so I used to go to a place called the Playwright on, it was 35th, maybe between 5th and 6th. And, you could go hang out, have drinks, have lunch, depending on how long you stayed, have dinner. And watch the races all day, and they had like live tellers and betting machines and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a, ATB that wasn't super depressing, and it was a lot of fun. And so I spent many a Saturday and Sunday, like the first 3, 4, 5 months of living in Manhattan, not knowing too many people in there, and that really kind of got me into the game more than anything else. Was doing that, and then ultimately decided I wanted to try to own some horses and. Got involved with a couple of partnerships as a partner, owning 3% or 5% of a few horses at a time, and then was fortunate enough to sell a business and be able to buy some horses on my own, and did that about 7 years ago, and then started Adelphi about 3 years ago. So it's been a good sort of journey throughout the last couple of decades, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. I believe the company you founded, it was called Audio HQ. Is that right?
Yeah, so it was a company that sold digital audio advertising. So, podcast ads, online music platform streaming ads, things like that. And then ironically, I ended up selling the business to an entity in the UK called Global Media and Entertainment, kind of like the iHeartRadio of the UK. But the guy that owns Global Media and Entertainment, it's a privately held business, is a guy by the name of Ashley Tabor, who's Michael Tabor's son from Coolmore. So there's a cool like sort of horse connection to that as well. So I've kind of had horse stuff always pop up throughout my experiences in life and business and whatnot. Even on the partnership side, I when I was running Audio HQ, we did a lot of business out in California, and I would go to LA like at least once a month, sometimes 2 times a month. And when they were running it at Santa Anita, I would always try to like clear my Thursday afternoon to go to the races out there. And because I was out there so much and watching racing from the West Coast so much, I actually got involved in a horse partnership called Little Red Feather Racing out there. And owned some horses there. So a lot of like horses were sort of always a part of my life, whether it was tangentially connected to what I was doing on the business side, or just hobby, fun, stuff like that. And obviously now I've kind of jumped into it full time, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty wild. I guess like at what point did you realize it was like Coolmore Tabor that you were selling the business to? Did you realize it right away, or at what
I,
point did you realize that?
I did not. I honestly had no idea. We were going through some of the sort of pre due diligence stuff, and as you would do, I did some research into the business and recognized the name, and didn't really think, oh, okay, there's a connection there. But I guess Tabor's not like a super common name. But once I started doing some of the research, I realized, oh, wait, there is a direct connection here. And it was kind of one of those things where I was like, maybe this is like a sign that I should be selling my company to this company because it's a very random connection to have. In the digital audio or advertising space, having a business and it's somehow being connected to what for me is my biggest passion in life, which is horses. So. I thought about trying to barter for a horse within the deal, but I figured I'd just stick to the meat and potatoes of selling the business for cash and stock and stuff like that.
Stallion share would have been a nice throw and a little cherry on top for a little
Yeah,
cherry
yeah,
on top of that.
exactly.
That's awesome. So I guess maybe you could kind of poke through the difference between starting Audio HQ and starting at Delphi. And I don't know if there's any similarities, differences. That'd be kind of cool to juxtapose what those two things were like.
Yeah, I mean, so I pretty much spent my whole career up until I founded Audio HQ in the digital audio and advertising space. So that really is what I would consider to be my sort of career path. I worked in radio. I grew up in Baltimore, as I said earlier. I worked in radio in Baltimore for a while. I worked on the sales side of the radio business in New York for a while after that. I worked for Pandora when it was starting up the internet radio platform. And so I had a lot of experience in the sort of media, audio, and advertising space. And so for me, Audio HQ was kind of like I've always been entrepreneurial, and I always knew I wanted to start a business from a ways back, but I didn't quite know what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it and when I was going to do it. But I kind of always knew I was going to do something in that space at some point. And so Audio HQ was kind of born out of that, right? It was just right time for it and an idea that came up and some other people, namely my co-founder, that aligned on the timing and all that. And so that was really always for me going to be like my big swing from a career standpoint, to try to start my own thing and do that and really treated it very much like a business that I was looking to grow and looking to ultimately obviously sell at some point and reap the rewards of that. And so for me, that was I had a very clear focus as it relates to that. When I started Delphi, it was really more about, okay, what the heck am I going to do now that I've sold this business? When I sold Audio HQ, I worked through a 3-year earnout. So I had a period of time post selling the business where I was still directly connected and managing the business. And then I had a consulting period after that. So I had a good 3 to 4 year window from when I sold the business till I no longer was working there. And when I started to get towards the end of that period, I was really just trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? I wasn't 40 years old yet. I'm a very bad golfer, although I can have some fun with it. And hobbies and passion wise, like horses was kind of always the thing that I wanted to do. And so it was kind of a natural thing for me to think about, okay, like if I'm not going to be doing media ad sales anymore, and I didn't really have an interest in starting another media ad sales business, if I'm not going to be doing that anymore, like what can I do that keeps me busy, that I know I'll have fun with, that I think I could be good at, and a horse racing partnership was kind of a natural fit there. I had owned horses as a partner in other syndicates historically, so I was familiar sort of with the business model and how things worked from that standpoint. And then also, when I was fortunate enough to sell my business and be in a financial position to buy my own horses, like 6 or 7 years ago, when I sort of started buying and selling my own horses, I did that like for a short period of time, and then very quickly met a bunch of other people that I owned or that owned horses with the same trainers I used or were somehow connected. And I went from, claiming 100% of a horse myself very quickly. This is way pre-Adelphi, but I went from claiming a horse for myself 100% to, splitting a horse 50-50 or taking thirds with two other guys or whatever it may be. Same thing with auction purchases and things like that. And so I learned, even though I came from the partnership, background, and I had transitioned into owning my own horses pre-Adelphi, I learned really quickly through that experience that I liked owning horses with other people. And it let me own more horses in quantity. It let me own better horses because I could buy into more, expensive horses by not having to put up 100% of the cost. And it was just a better experience in terms of like, having fun with other people and the camaraderie of it and stuff like that. And so, I knew that the experience of owning horses together was something that I was passionate about. And so I thought I'd be a good representative or person to help sort of foster that experience for other people through a partnership. And I mean, I guess the last thing that kind of, was a part of my thinking process was, if I was going to retire and not work anymore, and not have money coming in, horses is a hard business. And if I could afford to own, 3 or 4 horses a year, buy into 3 or 4 horses a year myself, by starting a partnership and, taking a smaller percentage of every horse that we bought and finding partners for the rest that, I could buy into 15 horses a year and maybe, depending on how quickly it grew and whatever, it was a way for me to get into more horses and to get more action and hopefully better horses and things like that. And so, that's kind of what it's morphed into I call it's more of a lifestyle business than a business. We try to make sure we check all the important boxes on the, legal side and the accounting side and on the operational side and all that stuff and handle the experience aspect for partners in a professional and business type way. But at the end of the day, it's not really like, designed to be a money making venture. It's more designed to, be something that I can do and enjoy and that allows me to own a lot more horses, hopefully better horses, with a bunch of people that I, enjoy hanging out with and experiencing the game with. And that's fortunately what it's turned into. Kind of a long way to answer your question, but there's definitely some similarities in terms of, my experience in running a business and operationalizing, how we do things at Adelphi and whatnot. But it's a very different point in my life, I guess, and a very different I have a very different focus on what I want it to be and how I want it to grow than I did my old business, which was more kind of like my big swing in my previous industry.
Percent. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think like I didn't realize what Adelphi meant. So maybe you could tell a story of kind of what Adelphi means and kind of, I think it would be really cool to know when you initially went out and you're like, okay, I'm gonna start a partnership, call it Adelphi. What was like the most surprising thing that you enjoyed the most that was kind of unexpected when you first kicked things off?
Yeah, so in terms of the name, kind of a similar story probably to how you name any business, at least businesses that I've been a part of in terms of naming them. I sat around with a couple of people that I founded Adelphi with, Brian Hahn and Jordan Zotz, and we were just kind of banding about and throwing names back and forth, and oh, do you like this? Do you like that? Or whatever. And then inevitably, a name comes through and you like it. And then you go on Google and you type it and someone else already has the name and you're like, it doesn't really work. And so we went through a lot of that. And I think Jordan was the one that threw out Adelphi. I think it was like around the time that the Adelphi Hotel was being remodeled up in Saratoga. So maybe that's why like it came to his brain. But he said, "What about Adelphi Racing Club?" And I was like the hotel, and he was like, "Well, no. If you look up what Adelphi means, it means a brotherhood, and we're trying to create and foster like a real community of people." Like-minded people that want to own horses together. That's the point of what we're doing. And it's honestly what brought Jordan, Brian, and myself together because we had all owned horses together before we started Adelphi. And so I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that Adelphi meant that. I was like, that's actually a really good, good fit. Audio HQ was an A name. Adelphi was an A name. So there's a little bit of a connection there. And we just thought it sounded good and was interesting, from the meaning perspective, and went forward with that. So that's how we got the name. I forget the second part of your question, to be honest.
It was sorry, I'm a notorious for asking two questions at once. The second question was when you so it totally makes sense, the reason behind it, and the name I think connects really well of like kind of like the mission behind it. When you got into it, was there any surprises, good, bad, otherwise, that you weren't expecting?
Well, I mean, the biggest surprise was we technically started Adelphi in the fall of 2019. And the idea was to claim a couple of horses in the fall, winter of 2019 into 2020 to really like start running horses under Adelphi in the spring, call it, of 2020. And what we wanted to do was sort of have like our first partnership was different than a lot of our other partnerships in that we got a group of people together, mostly friends and family and people that we were connected to. And the idea was you buy in and you own the two or three horses that we buy as a part of this partnership or claim as a part of this partnership. And we were really looking at it. I was looking at it more as like a beta test, so to speak. Like, one, would we enjoy the experience of doing this with other people? Two, would we enjoy or be good at the back end stuff, the operational stuff, all that. And the thought was always like, okay, we'll do it with these couple horses. And then when we get to the yearling sales at the end, the summer of 2020 and into the fall of 2020, if it's going well, that's when we'll start to like buy more horses and like scale it up and, have, 8 to 12 horses, right? That was kind of our short-term goal at the time. So that was really the plan going into 2020, and everything was going great. We got the horses. We claimed a horse, gave him a little bit of a break, claimed another horse, I think in January of that year. So we had two horses sort of to lead off the partnership going into the spring of 2020. And we ended up running the first one the day that Aqueduct closed to fans because of COVID. So like there was this like really short window where COVID was happening. The world hadn't completely shut down yet. Racing wasn't like in New York shut down, but they weren't allowing fans anymore and whatnot. And so our first race for Adelphi Racing Club, first race with the Silks, was the day that Aqueduct closed to fans. And so the horse actually ran good that day. It was a fun day. It was a surreal day, but it was a lot of fun. Ironically, given everything that was going on in the world. And then pretty much like 3 or 4 days later, like you couldn't leave your house, you couldn't go to the races, there was no racing, etc. So like the biggest surprise for me was like, all right, we're starting this thing, and we kind of got to like the plate. And we even, I guess, just using baseball terms, we kind of got our first hit because he didn't win, but he ran a nice second. Like it was a good start for the partnership. And then like the lights went off and everything stopped for really a good year and change. So that was the biggest surprise, was like we had this grand plan of, hey, we're gonna beta test this, we're gonna start buying more horses in the fall and into the spring, and grow this thing. And then as soon as we started our first horse, it was like, all right, wait a minute, like we can't even race our horses anymore, much less deliver a partnership experience that people would be into, or things like that. So that was definitely the biggest surprise. And in the end, it actually ended up working out really well, because we got to learn more about how best to service partners, how to set up everything on the back end so that it worked for us and worked for them. We got to work with trainers and some other people along the way that maybe we wouldn't have worked with as long a period of time before we started to ramp up. And so we really ended up having like a beta sort of test period for the club of, call it from January of 2020 through until the end of Saratoga 2021. And then obviously in that late summer and early fall, we started to buy yearlings and kind of, execute on the original plan. But it was certainly a surprise. One of the bigger surprises, I guess, in life that we'll have, and then also a big surprise as it related to growing the business and growing Adelphi.
Yeah, no one could have forecasted that one. So
No, it didn't show up in any of our business plans
yeah.
or yeah, no, definitely not.
Oh man, that's crazy. It's a good story. That was about the time I was graduating college. So it was a completely different experience for me in that time. I was 21 or 22. I was just graduating. I was in South Carolina. So the things were much more relaxed.
Mm.
Classes were pass fail. So it was like all this craziness going on. I felt kind of spoiled a little bit because things were a little bit more relaxed where I was at. But it was crazy times all around. I guess how many like partners you guys have right now? And I think a question like selfishly I want to ask is how do you guys communicate on like a day-to-day horse-to-horse basis? I see like you guys' website's amazing. I think the upcoming races tab is awesome. I think it's keeps things really easy for someone to have a question. When's my horse running? They can just go there. I guess can you kind of talk us through how you communicate to partners, how many you guys have, and kind of how that's all developed through the years?
Yeah, so when we started, sort of towards the end of 2020, we had about 3 horses under Adelphi. Right now we have, I think, 36, including a little baby foal that we just had from one of our very successful race mares. So we have 36 total horses now. Across those 36 horses, we have, I think, 140 partners, give or take. And obviously, not everybody owns all of the horses. So, we have some partners that have bought into one horse. We have other partners that have bought into dozens of horses, but 140 across, sort of the portfolio of horses. And we don't own, as a Delphi, we don't own 100% of every horse. So if we have 36 horses, the last time I looked, like it equated to like 19 or 20 whole horses, right? If you add it up, we own 50% of this one and 50% of that one and 33%, that kind of thing. And so we have 140 partners across all that. The average horse, has anywhere from 3 to 4 partners, including myself, to, at most maybe 14, 15, 16, depending, if we own 100% of the horse or whatever. So that's kind of how that breaks out. Our communication, I think, is really, really good. I think that's one of the things that we do very, very well. And for me, the biggest thing about it is I've tried my hardest to not commoditize the communication. And what I mean by that is, as we've grown and we have more and more partners and in business, and this actually kind of goes back to your original question of like how I thought about Audio HQ versus how I think about this. I was thinking about Audio HQ and growing that business. I would be thinking about it really from a scaling standpoint, right? Like how do I scale my communication so that I can have more partners and disseminate the information more efficiently across all those partners, in a very streamlined way. I don't really think about the world that way with Adelphi. What I think about with Adelphi is how do I create a partner experience that is as close to the experience of owning horses as I have as the managing partner, right? Like, because not everybody's going to have all the access and the communication directly with the trainers and the job, all that. It's just not possible, right? For someone who owns 3% or 5% of one horse to have that. But my goal is to make their experience feel as close to the experience that I have dealing with our bloodstock agent, dealing with jockeys, jockey agents, trainers, everyone, people from the racing office, everyone involved in the day-to-day of what we do, vets, etc. And so the approach I've taken on communication is, one, I try to over communicate. And sometimes that's not the best because in horse racing, and you probably have seen this in your experiences, like the ups and downs are constant and continuous, and these are very fragile animals, and little things can go wrong all the time, and it doesn't mean it's going to turn into a big thing, but as soon as you update somebody that owns a horse about something that didn't go quite 100%, their natural inclination is going to be worried. So there's definitely a case to be made that maybe less could be more in that respect. But I've always thought, like, if I'm being communicated something from the trainer, I'm going to communicate it to you. And then beyond the volume of communication and the transparency, I try to communicate in a very like direct, personal, and human way. So like I text with a ton of my partners on a regular basis. I call partners on a regular basis. I don't send emails through like an email tool that distributes out to a broad list. I, type in, the emails and I email them directly to people. So I try to make it more of a streamlined process. Now, or less of a streamlined process, more of a personalized process. Now, with 140 partners and 36 horses and trying to get out as much information as possible, like I have to create group email lists and do things like that and group text change and chains and like create Zoom calls to talk about bigger overarching things as opposed to communicating that individually to everybody. But the goal is to keep it as personalized as possible, as transparent as possible, and as less business oriented, I guess is a way to think about it, as possible. And so that's, I think, been a good approach. I try to do things like create video content, if I can. I just think that people enjoy the interactivity of that, and also like it just allows me to explain things better than I could explain in a written email. So I do a lot of video content that goes to partners, whether it's videos of their horses on the track or, just videos of handicapping the race that their horse is about to be in, or, what our thinking is as it relates to different spots or whatever. And so I think, definitely in 2025, you need to be taking advantage of multimedia content, when you can. And so I do that. So it's a combination of keeping it as personalized as possible and as transparent as possible, while still allowing for our operation to scale and for us to own more horses and bring in more partners. Um, that's kind of, there's no real secret sauce to it. It's just taking that approach, I think, has been beneficial to us. And I think most of our partners would agree that, that's a benefit to being involved with us.
Yeah, I think like we have a very similar ethos. I think. I mean, we have a unique situation where I feel like our whole mission is to get like 70% of our partners are under 35. Like we're 50% under 30, and we're $500 minimum. So it's like a lot of people are like new to racing. There's people that like the first race they watch is a race that they have a horse in. So we have a unique situation where we're trying to over communicate, but also trying to not use words like furlong and get too in the weeds, but also give everybody as much information as possible. So I guess how you obviously like come from, you had a tertiary connection to horses. Are a lot of your partners very knowledgeable when it comes to horse racing, or what level do they usually find you at?
So honestly, it really runs the gamut. But the point you're making, I think, is a really important one, because I run into it all the time, right? Like I'll give you a couple of examples from the last week. So we had a filly that did something that's called tying up after a workout, and like, I I know, right? If that happens, I can't just write, "Hey, the filly tied up. She's going to be okay. She's going to walk for the next 2 days." Whatever. People are like, "Well, what does that mean?" They don't know, right? There's a lot of terminology used in the industry that, like, even if you handicap and bet every weekend, like you're not going to know. And so I do a lot of like explaining what these terms mean, just because if you don't, people will be very lost. Then another example from this week, we have a horse that's going to debut on Wednesday, and he broke from the gate yesterday. And I sent a note out about it, broke from the gate, blah, blah, blah. And I had 2 or 3 partners email me like, "Oh, what was the time of the workout?" And I was like, "No, no, no. He just did a gate break. He wasn't breezing. He was just, practicing." And then, "Oh, but he broke like fast." And yeah, he did that for a furlong and then he slowed down. It was more to train him. He had to go full speed for the first furlong so that he understood the experience of braking and whatever. And so like, that'll still happen where like I'll put something in that I think is super clear and easy to understand, but to be completely fair to anyone, like it's not necessarily self-explanatory, and there's a lot of nuance, and trainers do things differently. I get a ton of feedback from partners. Like I had a filly work on the turf today for the first time. She's a really nice filly. She's 2 for 3 on dirt. She missed the break in her third start. She could easily be undefeated, but she's a twirling candy and she might be a turf horse. And so, we've been waiting to get her up in Saratoga to put her on the turf to see how she likes it, because you can't train on the turf at Belmont anymore because there is no turf. It's all dirt. It's been dug up. So get her on the turf for the first time today, and got video of the work. I was out there and whatnot, and I had everything ready to go to send to the partners. I was just waiting for the official time to come out. And I had a couple calls, and I guess in between me having a couple calls and whatnot, they posted the time of the work. So, inevitably, like, I have partners that, like, this is an exciting horse. She's 2 for 3. We're going to run her a stake next time. They're like waiting. They're getting their update. Oh, the filly worked, 4 furlongs in, 48 and whatever. And it was the fourth fastest of 33 works. They're like, oh, it's a fast work. It's good. And in this case, it actually was a really good work. But I get that a lot of times where people are like, oh, our horse works slow, or, oh, our horse worked fast. And they're either happy or sad. And I'm like, well, it's not really, like, doesn't necessarily tell the story. Like, sometimes they work slow and it's not good. Sometimes they work fast and it's not good because they're all out to do it. And then you get into things like turf works where the work is around the cones, or what we call the dogs. Like, people don't understand what that means, and don't factor in that, oh yeah, if you're, working 15 feet off, the fence, the fastest time is going to be slower than the fastest time when they're working on, down to the rail. So, like, there's all these things that happen that, like, you really do need to be cognizant of understanding that, like, unless you're doing this day to day and you're seeing it day to day, or you have previous experience with this thing or that thing, like, you're just naturally not going to know. And so a lot of times I am cognizant, like I said, of, like, if a filly ties up, I'm super cognizant of, like, okay, in that instance, I know 90% of the people are not going to know what I'm talking about. So I need to explain it, or, like, link to some, stuff that shows them what it means, or whatever. But still, like, the gate breaking thing that I was talking about before, like, I thought it was really self-explanatory, but it's not. So, like, you definitely have to try to, like, over communicate and over explain. I'm sure there's, like, a plethora of other examples of this that you've probably dealt with. Um, that require hand holding and require explanation. And by the way, like, it's not a bad thing, because, like, a lot of what I think people should be getting out of this experience of owning, 3% or 5% of horses is, like, exposure to this part of the industry, right? And an understanding of it. And, I have plenty of people that come to us, like, have gambling background, and they'll look at workout times and they'll think about how important that time is. And I'm like, God, from my view, like, first of all, I've seen a million of the times be wrong. Like they mix up this set of workers with that set of workers, and I know our horse worked in this set with this horse, but they have them working with this horse in a different set at a different distance. Like, it's not even right. And then, the times, not the end all be all. Like, God, okay, I know. Like, we had 2 fillies work today. The work I was talking about. One of the fillies did it super easy, and she won the work by a half a length. The other one was not life and death, but life and death to stay with her, and she lost by a half a length. And the same workout time on the same track on the same day. So if I'm just, and so people, if that's all the experience that they have, it makes sense, right? They're going to think, oh, okay, that was a fast work that day. But there's so much more to it. And so I think people can enjoy the experience of learning these things. I also think it's beneficial to them when they're handicapping or doing other things that are somehow connected to the business or the industry. An understanding of how all that works, or how trainers prep their horses, or whatever. Like, all that stuff should be helpful to people and interesting to people that want to get involved. Because you're not gonna buy racehorses to make money. You're hopefully buying racehorses for that experience and the dream, and to have fun with it, and to learn, and to do it with other people and all that sort of stuff. And so, like, very long way of saying, like, this is such a big part of my day to day. It sounds like it is a little bit for you too. And for anybody who's, like, listening or watching, like, that one of the best things about owning racehorses, like owning percentages of racehorses in this kind of model, is, like, being able to ask these questions and learning these things. If you're genuinely curious about it, or, like, maybe even selfishly, like, if you just want to handicap and bet better, like, you're going to get exposure to some things that will help you on that front, just by virtue of being, seeing a different part of the industry.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. It's a lot of for me, it's usually an analogy to football or basketball, and I'm trying to just like tie it in somehow. Not sometimes I'm trying a little too hard to make an analogy, but it's a ton of fun. I think it's probably what I enjoy most about doing this stuff is like educating and giving people out information as well as like I'm still learning. This is our third year. You've been doing it since 2020, owned horses for a while before too. So I'm sure you're still learning new terminology, and you're like, what was that? I'm not really sure what that means. Like there's a lot of
Percent.
that goes on.
Yeah,
So yeah,
100%. Yeah, I asked all these questions that partners are asking and didn't understand all the things that they don't understand. Going back, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago from when I, started owning horses myself and dealt directly with trainers and stuff like that. It's certainly not something anyone really picks up, or knows right away. So you're gonna have to ask questions and learn, and hopefully, we can be, you on your end and me on my end, and other people that are in similar positions can be helpful and educate people.
yeah. There's like no more fun I think though than like I think it's really interesting to see the different things that people ask and the different ways people enjoy it. You kind of alluded to it where it's like some people are just interesting because they want to gamble on it more. Some people just want to tell the pretty girl at the bar they own a horse. Some people like want to just are sort of interested. They really like sports. They try to want to own a piece of something. So it's cool to see the different questions and the different like reasons for getting involved that people have. Another question that I have for you is I know you guys use a fair mix of trainers, and you were mentioning how different trainers do different things. Can you kind of talk through your guys' process in terms of pairing certain horses with certain trainers, kind of how you go about that process and the different pros and cons of that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm cognizant of not trying to pigeonhole trainers, right? Because I think a lot of trainers get grouped into, oh, they're good with turf horses, or oh, they're good with long on dirt horses, or oh, they're good with 2-year-olds, and and there's definitely areas of expertise, and for some trainers that's the case, right? Like they have a very clear area of expertise or area of focus, but I don't think that that's the case for 100% of the universe of trainers. A really good example of that is was Christophe Clement, who we used Christophe, and we now use his son Miguel. Obviously, Christophe passed away recently, but Christophe got looked at as like a turf trainer, and if you really look at like his track record, especially over the last 10 to 15 years, like I mean, the guy was like he was pigeonholed as like a long on turf European import trainer. And you look at it over the last 5 years, he's one of, if not the best trainer of New York breds that there is. He was very good with 2-year-olds, and at the same time, extremely good with giving horses long careers and, having horses sound when they're 4, 5, 6, and running races and winning at a high level. Like he did a lot of different things because he was someone who could adapt. Right. And, he saw an opportunity in the New York breds and took advantage of it where maybe some other trainers didn't. And, he really could do most of everything. So there's definitely some trainers that specialize in certain areas, some trainers that are, better at a lot of things, but they don't necessarily get the stock to be able to show it. And then some trainers that they get the rap of, oh, they're good at this and they're not good at that, when there's actually like factual data and analytical evidence that they are good at this other thing. So try not to like pigeonhole people first and foremost. But with all that said, we do still try to marry the horse to the trainer. Now, maybe that's less of us looking at a horse and saying, okay, this horse is a dirt sprinter. Who are our best dirt sprint trainers? Let's send that horse to that person. And maybe it's more of a, hey, we really like this horse at a sale. We think that she or he is a dirt sprinter. Christoph is here, or Miguel is here, or Tom Morley's here, or Ray Handel's here. Hey, let's decide who we want to show this horse to and get their feedback, right? And get an understanding of whether they like the horse, what they think are the positive and negative attributes to the horse, if they think the horse will fit their program, those sorts of things. We take more of that kind of approach. Because at the end of the day, like one thing that I know for sure is you do not want to give a horse to a trainer that the trainer doesn't want that horse. Like that's just a recipe for failure, right? So you want the trainer to be bought into the horse, to like the horse, to think that the horse will fit their program, to start to give you the semblance of a plan of like, here's what I would do with this horse if I got the horse. That's the most important part to me in terms of matching trainer to horse. And then we have other calculuses as well, right? Like we try to support a lot of different trainers and have diversity of options there for our partners, right? Because a lot of this is about experience, and some partners enjoy the experience of owning a horse with this trainer more so than this trainer, and then vice versa. Other people might like that trainer that the other person didn't enjoy owning horses with, and so we try to give the partners a variety of experiences as it relates to who we work with. And then geographical location of the trainer is important. If we're buying a turf horse and we know that a trainer doesn't leave New York, during the winter, we know we might have a problem, because then what do we do with the horse if it's a horse that needs to keep racing over the course of the winter? And so maybe we wouldn't give the horse to that trainer because of that logistical or operational issue. So there's a variety of things that go into it. I guess we are cognizant of a lot of this, and we do try to mix and match based on all of it, but we're trying our best to not pigeonhole our trainers. Now, if the data shows that they're categorically not good with this kind of horse, like we're not going to, try to fit a square peg through a round hole. And that's our job to be smart with that sort of stuff. But we won't just say, okay, Clement, you get all of our turf horses, Ray Handle, you get all of our dirt sprint fillies, like that. That's not what we're trying to do. But we're analyzing that sort of stuff as a part of the whole process.
Yeah, there's a lot of like follow-up questions I have. I know like we're running low on time here. Like how you can deal with the synthetic in New York. I'm interested in the full about that. But I think my favorite question to ask during these interviews is kind of future of horse racing. And the question I always ask is, if you had a magic wand, you were king, there's no financial ties to it, you could have whatever you want to change within horse racing and try to grow it. What would you change and why?
Yeah, so I don't know that I have a perfect answer for that question, or that I'm going to answer it super directly, but I'll try to sort of talk around it, I guess, a little bit, and hopefully by talking around it, ironically, I'll be a little bit more direct. So the thing that frustrates, we're an industry that has a lot of challenges. That is clear, right? Like I'm someone that comes historically from the radio industry, right? Like the radio industry has consolidated a ton and has shrunk a ton over the last decades that I've been involved in it, or that I was involved in it. And horse racing, anyone that wants to paint rose-colored glasses and say that we're in great shape is just not either not fairly evaluating it or blowing smoke. But on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and a lot of other places, I think as an industry, we spend entirely too much time discussing the negatives, and we spend virtually no time analyzing or looking at the positives and the areas that we have that are opportunities. And so from an Adelphi Racing Club perspective, and from my perspective, we're very New York focused. We run 90-something% of our horses in New York. And New York has its challenges, don't get me wrong. But we have a tremendous opportunity with the new Belmont that literally is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for the industry. And if we spend all of our time focusing on all the stuff that's wrong, and the full crop decline, and the CAWs and all this stuff, we'll miss the opportunity that's in front of us, which is, shit, we've got a brand new state-of-the-art building that's going to be live and operational in about a year, outside of the biggest city in the country, like easy access, in a brand new sort of like park development area where you've got a hockey and concert arena, you've got shops and restaurants, all this stuff. if we don't focus on how to make that like the best it can possibly be, if we don't, as an industry, the bettors, the owners, the stakeholders that work within the industry, if we don't get together, work together to try to figure out how to like take advantage of that opportunity. I know I'm not giving specifics. I know we don't have a ton of time. I could talk your ear off on it, but like to me, the key is like if I could wave a magic wand and make one change, it wouldn't be to have this magical thing happen or that magical thing happen. It would be just to get right the stakeholders that really care about racing to positively and optimistically look at a few of the things. And I gave one example. The new Belmont's clearly that new example. And look, you see negativity about the new Belmont on Twitter all the time, which is insane to me, right? So it's not even like we can agree that it's a good thing. It is a good thing, right? And it's a huge opportunity. And everyone needs to be focused on doing their part to make it work. Because what I can do, what you can do, what people that are way more influential than us in the industry can do pales in comparison to the opportunity that's just naturally being created by this brand new building going up in New York, right? And all the things that can stem off of that. So, like the magic wand thing that I would wave is like, hey, we have this as a positive, we have that as a positive. Let's all focus on the positives and figure out how to create the most value from that, and not go lowest common denominator with everything and not go negative and complaints about everything. Look, I've complained on Twitter about plenty of horse racing things, so I get it. But like, we do need to. If the industry was growing, by leaps and bounds, it wouldn't matter, right? But it's not. It's contracting, and so if we want it to be a thriving industry moving forward, if we want it to be, something that we all can enjoy 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, like when we get opportunities, when we're doing things right, when there are areas that can be exploited to the benefit of the industry, like let's all be focused and aligned with like going after that. Like what you're doing is great, right? Like bringing younger people into the game. And I could probably talk about 3 or 4 different ways that like the new Belmont should be direct, like you should be working with Naira in ways with that to bring young people to the track. Because I mean, we're talking about Aqueduct and I love Aqueduct, but like I don't know how many 27, 28-year-old guys from the city I'm going to bring out to Aqueduct and show them like a great time. If I brought them to Saratoga or Del Mar, I think I could show them a great time. But Aqueduct, I couldn't. Belmont, the old Belmont, I couldn't. The new Belmont, I think we could, right? And so, like, that's one area of that opportunity that should be exploited. It's directly connected to what you're doing, what a lot of other people are doing. Like, let's focus on that sort of stuff. Let's not focus on all the negative all the time. That'd be the thing that I would want for the industry. It's just alignment on the positives and everybody working together on the things that we do have as opportunity to grow the game.
Yeah, that's very well said. I oftentimes say on here that one of the biggest challenges of horse racing is that there are so many stakeholders that there's really no conduit between them. And it's incredible to consider what could be possible if we all grab the rope from the same direction and pull it the same way. And something like the new Belmont Park should be that sort of let's rally around it instead of nitpick certain things and just shoot arrows everywhere for no particular reason. So that was really well said. I'm ready to run through a brick wall right now, I think.
Don't do that. but let's look. Let's work together. Let's figure out how to I think I looked into what you guys were doing a little bit after we met, and I mean, if I could be helpful in any way, I think there's definitely opportunities, with the new Belmont and other things, let's work together and grow the game. Let's, you're young, obviously younger than me, but I'm 41. I want to be doing this for the next 30 years. Hopefully I can do it for the next 30 years. And in order for that to happen, like, we need to grow areas of the industry again. We need things positive to happen. And, whether, you're directly connected to it or I'm directly connected to it, doesn't really and shouldn't really matter. Like, as long as it's like leading to that end result of like a better experience for us and a long-term experience for us in this game moving forward.
100%. Totally agree. All right. We're running low on time here. I want to run through these rapid fire questions. They're all pretty much like one word, one sentence questions. So we'll just jump right into it. All right. Favorite track?
Saratoga.
Easy one. Favorite horse of all time?
Barbara.
Oh, yeah. Favorite race to attend? So big stakes race, any race.
Dubai World Cup, which is a random one, but I've been there twice, and it was the greatest race I've ever seen in my life. It was Arrogate's Dubai World Cup as a fan, and then we went back for Pandygate last year for the UAE Derby, so I was there for Dubai World Cup. That was it's just an experience that's different than anything, and it's a good example of like what a building and like that sort of thing can do for the experience. A random one. I'm sure I could think of several others, but just came to mind.
Yeah, third to Forever Young, aged pretty well. I think Bookham Dana was he in that race too? Was he
No,
second?
Bookham Dana was in the Saudi race and then didn't end
Ah,
back there. But yeah, no, don't think I. So we argued, not argued, but we had plenty of spirited conversations. Joe Migliori, Miguel Clement, and I about where to run Pandygate, and Miguel was adamant about Dubai being the easier of the spots. And then when you look at the field last year and the UAE Derby, I don't think we had any Forever Youngs in the wood. So we don't miss an opportunity to give him a hard time about that. But but it was a cool experience, and it was cool to run against that horse. And I wish he won the Derby because I had a lot of money on him off of that.
yeah, he was close. He should have won,
Yeah,
honestly.
I know, I know.
Best horse in the day. Panda should be back soon, right?
Yeah, actually,
Oh,
Pandygate he worked again yesterday. I think he's got 6 works in now. He has a race on August 10th in Saratoga, so he'll be back in a little less than a month.
good deal. All right, back to our rapid fire. All right, when you hear the word successful, who is the first person to come to mind?
I think probably just because it's top of mind right now for me, Christophe Clement.
Deal. Do you have a quote you live by or think of often?
Yeah. So yes, it's a weird one, and we have a horse named it. But better to be lucky than good.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right. Any advice to your younger self?
Slow down.
It's a good one. All right. Any parting last words for the audience here? Words of advice to me, words of advice to the audience. You know, any things to consider, why you should love horse racing, just any last parting words.
No, look, I mean, I think we covered a lot of what I would say in terms of like the magic wand question. I just hope people, I understand it. I get frustrated about things in racing all the time, every day, racing office things and this and that, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's a fun game. And it's an experience for a lot of people. You talked about it earlier in a lot of different ways. There's very few things that you could do in life where you have these kinds of experiences. I'll say, because I'm going to Del Mar this week, I'm in Saratoga. Like I can't think of a time where I've taken someone to a racetrack like that, like for the first time, whether they're a fan or not a fan or whatever, where they've walked away saying, "Oh yeah, that sucked." Everyone has a good time, and it could be a good time for a different reason. Some guys that have gone to Del Mar with us that have never owned horses, like they just love the gambling. Other guys are like, "Oh shit, I'll stand out here and look at all the girls, like that's fun." Or other people come and they're like, "Wow, they're like beautiful animals," and like they get into that aspect. So there's just something for everyone, and hopefully, like what I always say to people is like, just bring people to the races, bring people to experience like a big day, because that's how we're going to grow the game. And like I said, I legitimately can't think of anyone that I've ever brought to like a Keeneland or Saratoga or Del Mar or whatever, that didn't walk away from it saying, "Yeah, that was cool. I had a good time," for whatever reason. So it's like for me, a surefire way for us to grow the game, and I hope that more people do it.
Yep. And there's no better way to enjoy the day than to share it with someone and love. So I totally agree with that, and appreciate everything you do, and appreciate you joining us here. This is an awesome conversation. I'm sure if I'm in Saratoga at some point, I'll probably shoot you a text and probably try to grab your ear somewhere. Hopefully with the beverage in our hands. So hope to see you here soon. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have safe travels to Del Mar, and hit a couple big tickets with your buddies.
I appreciate it, Matt. Hopefully we'll see each other when I get back. I'm here for the rest of the meet, so we'd love to catch up.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Take care.
See ya. All right. I think we're good. Thanks, Matt. That was fun.
Yeah, had a good time. When you come up, let me know.
Yep, will do. Sounds good. Safe travels.
Take care.
See ya.